The Spirit of God, working in the church and filling her members ever more abundantly with the light and strength of Christ, in proportion as they have been attacked and persecuted by the enemies of truth, has inspired men to react against the evils of our time by a revival of all the aspects of the Catholic life of prayer. First of all, the Holy Spirit has been teaching us, principally through the Holy Father in his encyclicals, that the Christian life of prayer is and must remain an organic unity, of which the very heart is the mystery of the Eucharist. The divine grace which diffuses itself from this center throughout the whole body of our prayer life travels through the arteries which are provided by the various forms of liturgical worship, sacraments and sacramentals. In order for this bloodstream of grace to be healthy and abundant, our minds must enter deeply into the prayer of the Church by active participation in her liturgical actions, in which she prays and worships as one with Christ, the great high priest. This active participation necessarily implies understanding, and understanding is normally impossible without reading and meditation. Hence it is that the public and private prayer of the Christian are by no means in opposition to one another, but they complete and interpenetrate one another in a harmonious and organic union. The full expression of a Christian life of prayer does not stop with participation in the liturgy, but goes on to include extra liturgical forms of prayer like the Rosary, as well as meditation and mental prayer. Everything that can open the spirit of man to the influence of loving faith and can inspire his heart with supernatural desires must find a place in his life of prayer. Hence it is that the Church's love for her greatest treasure, the Blessed Eucharist, does not stop at the solemn and devout celebration of Mass, but also overflows into many other public, though not liturgical, expressions of her devotion. Also, the Church urges her faithful, and particularly her priests, to make visits to the Blessed Sacrament reserved in her tabernacles, to spend long periods of the day or night in adoration before the Blessed Sacrament exposed and enthroned upon the altar. In a word, the Eucharistic life of the Church, which is publicly manifested and expressed in the great liturgical mystery, also finds expression in other forms of worship in which the devotional life of the individual Christian evolves according to the needs and attractions of each one in particular. The happy combination of liturgical prayer and extra-liturgical devotion and meditation contributes to the perfect formation of the Christian as a member and a replica of Christ, provided that his prayers and devotions outside the liturgy are themselves in harmony with the spirit of the liturgy and with the mind of the Church. Nothing so effectively kills our appreciation of the Blessed Sacrament as routine. To say Mass and receive communion automatically, to approach the sacraments in careless and distracted manner, is to take the great gifts and mysteries of God for granted, as if they were objects and facts like all the material things that enter into our lives. Under such circumstances, our faith tends to degenerate into superstition and vain observance, and indeed to become a kind of practical skepticism under the exterior appearance of pious conformity. God withdraws from our lives, and his withdrawal gradually becomes evident to everyone except ourselves. The great tragedy of our age is the fact, if one may dare to say it, that there are so many godless Christians, that is, whose religion is a matter of pure conformism and expediency. Their faith is little more than a permanent evasion of reality, a compromise with life. In order to avoid admitting the uncomfortable truth that they no longer have any real need for God or any vital faith in him, they conform to the outward conduct of others like themselves. And these believers cling together, offering one another an apparent justification for lives that are essentially the same as the lives of their materialistic neighbors whose horizons are purely those of the world and of its transient values. In order to counteract the danger of this spiritual paralysis, The Holy Father urges Christians to renew the fervor of their faith and to cultivate an interior life. In order to do this, we must read, we must pray, we must meditate, we must seek every possible contact with God who sent his Son into the world to deliver men from the coldness and vanity of purely human religious forms. This is an excerpt from the prologue of Thomas Merton's The Living Bread. Self-explanatory.